smartphone crystal ball, touch screen and all, but the screen won't touch. And it's this analog melody stuck in my head, and it's driving me insane, cause I got this chronic condition that'll suffer no remission, and I'm feeling that I ain't got time. Oh yeah. Show me an android heart, an AI mind, and the spirit in the machine. Show me an optimistic and futuristic prognosis and what it means. Help me to see the future between the sutures. Will it be good or bad, or will we recognize a thing when we all pull the pin? Will it resemble what we had? It's a singularity. Yeah, it's a singularity. Beyond event horizon, will we wisen up or find a kind of glory? What's the story of the singularity?
What you hear is not a test, it's a singularity. A risk thing, isn't it? Do you envision it, or does the future look rather dissonant? Robot style, but what about later? Will it be like Terminator? Or are we headed for utopia? Well, follow me and I'll show ya.
Voices from every field across the world are coming to ya. Attend the class or watch from home. It's coming to ya. Solez has the contacts and he's bringing them to ya. It's coming to ya. The future's coming to ya. So come to the future.
Technology and the future of medicine. Lab NP 590.
All right. Nice. The standard part of the system, it pretends it's not going to behave, and then it finally shows you something. So, anyway, there are all these moments where you think that the system's completely broken. Okay, so today is the technological singularity explained and promoted. And the objectives are to understand that one should not fear complexity. Do not seek the one great truth. There are many truths. They can all be true simultaneously, concurrently. Understand the three main schools of belief about singularity. Understand the four main paths to the singularity. Understand the history of the singularity and Marcus Hutter's main ideas about it. And the challenge of promoting the singularity and the idea behind Future Day and Diversity Day. Now, that last, or next to last word, I don't know how you feel about diversity, but recently we have discovered that longevity, like celebrating longevity, is a thing in every other country except Canada. There seems to be something un-Canadian about celebrating longevity, and diversity is, so we haven't really settled on what to do in the fall, what to celebrate in the fall, whether it should be diversity, longevity. There's an opportunity if one of you are really into longevity, because every other country has a leader, longevity leader in like the all sorts of political action except Canada. So you could be like the Canadian longevity guru if you wanted to. But, so we're coming up on March 1st. March 1st is Future Day. And we could do something on Friday, March 1st, or not, depending upon what you guys want. Okay, do not fear complexity. It's beauty in complexity. Your significant other, your best friend is complex. It's not a bad thing. Real world is complex. You may know this word, equipoise. Did you know that's a specific Canadian word? When you learn about ethics in other countries, they don't talk about equipoise. They never heard of that. It's a word in ethics that only exists in Canada. It was made in Canada, and yeah, there doesn't seem to be a counterpart in any other country. So the perfect quadruple, think with equipoise, seemingly contradictory ideas can all be true, can find a balance between them. The future of transplantation, for instance, one of my main interests is not just one thing, but a hybrid of a bunch of things. Promotion of deceased donor donation until there are no more waiting lists, tolerance, tissue engineering, repair, stem cell creation of new organs, all those things. That's the future. So, part of what we're trying to accomplish in this course is making you not afraid of complex things. When you're in a meeting and someone else says, that's too complicated, think silently to yourself, that's an opportunity for me. Because all these people are going to reject that because it's too complicated. And I realize I can start working on that without completely understanding it. And the pieces will fall into place somehow. And eventually I will understand it all, even though I don't have a clue about some parts of it now. And a lot of the things that I've done have been just like that, where I didn't have complete understanding in the beginning, but I was the only one trying to do the thing that I was doing, had no competition whatsoever. So that's an important concept. And this idea of just choosing one thing, like Peter Diamandis, the co-founder of Singularity University and the ex-Parnas chair, says, when faced with the choice between two desirable goals, choose both. It may not seem possible, but probably there is a way to do that. So there's some things to think about. So trying to find metaphors that work for everybody and across cultures is difficult, but Alice in Wonderland is a pretty widely known story, so things we're trying with that. And if you remember the story of Alice in Wonderland, a world is confronted that's much more organic than expected, where everything's alive. You're playing croquet and the mallet is alive and the ball is alive and everything's alive. The main difficulty Alice had was in managing her flamingo, describing the croquet game. So we face a future just the opposite of that, where the world is much less organic than expected and possibly could exist without us at all. The technological singularity, we face a world less organic than expected that could develop without us. So the three main schools of belief about the singularity. This is not a hard list to memorize. You know, it's only 3 things, so you can come up with some sort of mnemonic, but it'd be really cool if you were able to like spiel off these 3. Accelerating change, event horizon, and intelligence explosion. And understand the difference between them. They're different concepts of what the singularity basically is. And then there are 4 main paths to reaching the singularity. You can create an artificial intelligence that exceeds human intelligence. You can have a cybernetic singularity where humans and computers aggregate, come together, build human-computer interfaces that allow humans to go beyond their innate intelligence to a significant extent. Cybernetic singularity. Third way is find ways in biology to improve upon the natural human intellect. That's probably the slowest, But it's a cool thing to think about, like with CRISPR-Cas9, maybe you'd find the gene that, who knew that there was a single gene that would like increase your IQ by 60 points or something? We haven't found anything like that, but I guess if we did, then this number 3 could be real. You know, it could compete with the others. And number 4 is probably something you think about every day. Every day when you log on the internet, you're wondering whether there's going to be a smarter than you entity coming back at you, right? Like, you click to go somewhere and says, no, you shouldn't go there, you go here, you know, and suddenly your whole world has changed because this device you carry around that you think works for you, it thinks you work for it, and so that would be number 4. These different variations of the belief in the singularity are reflected in the courses at Singularity University. And of the various experiences of my life, that was one of the most potent. I was only there for 9 days. It was a 9-day executive course. And if you think of a course maybe you've taken of that length, at the end of the course itself, you know a certain amount, or you're kind of stimulated, animated by the course. And day by day, you lose the knowledge and the memories sort of fade, and then it becomes just a little blip in your life, and then that blip gets smaller and smaller, right? That's the way most 9-day experiences are. But this one, it introduced me to whole new concepts and a bunch of people that I knew nothing about before, and it sort of kept growing. So, it was really cool from that point of view, and it ended up with me creating this course because I felt that universities need something like that as an extension of that. So it's a picture of our class. And Ray Kurzweil, who's the Chancellor of Singularity University and head of engineering at Google, his views and intellectual exploration are as broad as the university he founded. So, like, sometimes you'll be at a party in the evening and somebody will start complaining about Ray Kurzweil as if he held very narrow, fixed views. And what that person doesn't realize is that, like, his last 2 books come from people sending critiques to him and his reacting to those criticisms and stuff. So that's what his world is, and he's still reachable. He walks around without a security detail. When I went to a premiere of one of his movies, I was the only one wearing a tux. I thought you wore a tux at a premiere. With a big premiere, you do, but this was a level of movie where I was the only one with a tux. I was eating chips and I had all this granular chip dust on my hands, and I'd shake his hand. He's looking, what's this guy done to me, you know? So anyway, that's sort of how we met, but he did say I was the only one properly dressed. So if you write to him with some criticism, you know, I think the singularity is not true at all, blah, 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 blah. He will not only come back with an answer to what you've sent him, but then he'll tell you some new things that you never knew that will sort of add to your knowledge in that area. So he is still somebody who would react to any of you if you write to him, and you know, you would get something back, so that's kind of cool. Okay, so from this point onward, we're going to enter into Marcus Hutter's slide set. Now, those of you who already listened to the length that I sent, it's an interesting dynamic. You would imagine, as I keep teaching this course, keep talking about the fact that he hates interaction with you, the student body of this course, and really found it very off-putting the one time he Skyped with us. that eventually things will come around and he'll Skype with us again and he'll love it and it'll be great. So I do think that'll happen sometime. Okay, so what's the history of the Singularity? It goes back to R. Thornton. Who was he? He was the editor of a periodical you probably haven't heard of, the expounder of primitive Christianity. How's that for a name? Wow, it brings all sorts of visions. Wrote about the recent invention of a 4-function mechanical calculator. Such machines, by which the scholar may, by turning a crank, grind out the solution of a problem without the fatigue of mental application, would, by its introduction into school, do incalculable injury. But who knows that such machines, when brought to greater perfection, may not think of a plan to remedy all their own defects and then grind out ideas beyond the ken of the mortal mind. So that was the first expression of this self-improving machine. And in 1863, 4 years after Darwin published On the Origin of the Species, there was a lot of professional jealousy in this guy, Darwin. You know, and so Samuel Butler published somewhat humorous letter captioned Darwin Among the Machines, and compared human evolution to machine evolution, prophesizing half in jest that machines would eventually replace man in the supremacy of the earth. In the course of the ages, we shall find ourselves the inferior race. Letter raises many of the themes now being debated by the proponents of the technological singularity. And in the book Erewhon, which you will all recognize immediately as nowhere spelled backwards, Butler argued there is no security against the ultimate development of mechanical consciousness in the fact of machines possessing little consciousness now. A mollusk has not much consciousness. Reflect upon the extraordinary advance which machines have made during the last few hundred years, and note how slowly the animal and vegetable kingdoms are advancing. The more highly organized machines are creatures not so much of yesterday as of the last 5 minutes, so to speak, in comparison with past time. Okay, this brings us to Marcus Hutter. So I sent you a PowerPoint that came originally from him with rather dark background slides. So I'm now going to present the same slides with a somewhat more uplifting background and with my voice rather than his, and so on. He also has this article, Can Intelligence Explode? Okay, so these are some of the famous authors, science fiction authors, mathematicians, and thinkers who have written about singularities. Stanislaw Ulam, 58, I.J. Good, 1965. Werner Vinge, who's still an active science fiction writer, in 1993. And then Kurzweil is the best known name here. And there are Singularity events, Singularity summits, and as I pointed out last time, Singularity University has taken over most of these and has acquired them. They're now part of Singularity University, although this course has no direct relation to SU. David Chalmers, the philosopher, has also written about this. And this is another depiction of Moore's law, this idea of exponential change. This is on a log scale where you get this more or less straight line of improvement in machine processing power per unit of purchase power. So, superintelligence by Moore's law. Moore's law doubles every 1.5 years, not valid for the past 50 years. Long as there is a demand for more computing power, Moore's law could continue to hold for many more decades before computronium is reached. Now, computronium is an exam question, and every single year on the midterm, there are some students who leave that question blank. So I'm sort of stopping at this point to say, it's going to be on the midterm. This is one of the things I'd like you to know is what computronium is, okay? It's the idea of turning the whole world into computing, the whole universe. That's what computronium is. I don't think it's something you're going to learn about in any other course. So it's something I'd like you to know about in this course. Computronium, right there. Yeah. In 20, 30 years, the raw computing power of a single computer will reach 1015, 1016 flops, which is the same as the human brain. Some conjecture is that software will not lag far behind, so we'll have human-level AI in 20 to 30 years. And so what is the doubling time of tech? You can see how things have gotten much faster. The hunter-gatherer Stone Age, things doubled every 250,000 years. So it took a long time for things to change. Now it's much faster. This is another way of thinking about things, these various epochs. DNA evolves, brains evolve, technology evolves, so on. And the end here is the universe wakes up. And this also relates to Jonathan White's TED Talk, which is something you're responsible for in the course on the midterm, whether or not Jonathan White teaches before the midterm. So just the same as Rich Sutton, that slide of Rich Sutton's beliefs and his contribution to the 2015 AI safety meeting, that is a required part of the course, whether or not Rich Sutton teaches before the midterm. And similarly, Jonathan White, that second half of his TED Talk is also a required part of this course. Is the singularity negotiable? Appearance of smarter than human AI is the ignition of a detonation cord toward the singularity, point of no return. Maybe the singularity is already now unavoidable. Politically, it's very difficult but not impossible to resist technology or market forces. You may be aware there are multiple books that suggest stopping technology. But if you look at the behavior of every single author who's written such a book, they don't believe their own book because they're behaving as if technology can't be stopped and is continuing to move on, even though they've written these books, enough, all this kind of thing. So it doesn't seem like there's an author writing a convincing book who believes his own book in this area. So probably technology is not going to stop. Be similarly difficult to prevent AGI, artificial general intelligence research, even more so to prevent the development of faster computers. Whether we are before, at, or beyond the point of no return is also philosophically intricate, as it depends on how much free will one attributes to people and society. And so we talk a lot about free will in this course. But from my point of view, the course is still important even if free will is extremely limited. Even if you all think what you did today is some product of your independent decision making, but actually it's completely deterministic, and like years ago, one could have predicted what you were going to do today. Even if that's so, I think this course still has a role. And I myself don't think that we live in a completely deterministic world. Analogy 1, politics and the inevitability of global warming. You may have read just today that the oceans are warming much more quickly than scientists thought, which is really bad news for the human race. Analogy 2, a spaceship close to an event horizon near a black hole might in principle escape a black hole, but is doomed in practice due to limited propulsion. If it could go fast enough, it could escape, but it can't go fast enough. Okay, so this is the slide that I told you about, where Marcus Hutter tried to teach me what the slide is saying, and I sort of failed the lesson. So it's down here, Library of Babel. So if you had a library that contains all human knowledge, every book ever printed, including the ones printed backwards or wrongly or whatever, what this is saying is that library would have essentially zero information value despite containing everything. And that's an interesting concept to sort of wrap your head around, the Library of Babel. And I guess part of the reason is you wouldn't have the resources to have any way to search that. And the fact that it contains errors as well as properly printed books would just, it ends up in a no-win scenario. Too much information collapses. Maximally compressed information is indistinguishable from random noise. So, inside process resembles a radiating black hole observed from the outside. Maybe a society of increasing intelligence becomes increasingly indistinguishable from noise when viewed from the outside. And that's why he believes that the sound of the singularity, if somebody over there is going through it and you're just watching them, would be white noise. So that's the sound. And nobody had previously ever described it. They just said it couldn't be predicted. So it's kind of cool that he has predicted something specific. And also each year, our students, when asked what the sound of the singularity according to Marcus Hutter is, that leave that question blank too. So I'm trying to get rid of these instances of blank paper in the midterm. Okay, comparison. Each way, outsiders cannot witness a true intelligence singularity. Expansion inward-outward usually follows the way of least resistance. Outward explosion will stop when all accessible convertible matter has been used up. So outward explosion then means that the whole world becomes computronium. You take everything out there and you make it all into a computer. Historically, mankind has always been outward exploring, but just in recent times it's become more inward exploring. Miniaturization, virtual reality. So we really don't know which way it's going to go, whether maybe the technological advances in the future would be internal rather than external. Conclusion. Strict intelligence singularity is neither experienced by insiders nor by outsiders. Assuming that recording technology does not break down, then a singularity seems more interesting for the outsiders than for the insiders. If you're going through it, it just seems like it's normal life. Like your activities are speeded up, everybody else's activities are speeded up, so you don't really recognize anything odd about what's going on. Whereas from the outside, it seems like you're going impossibly fast and stuff like that. On the other hand, outsiders actively live potential society, insiders actively live potential societal changes while outsiders only passively observe them. What is intelligence? The numerous attempts to define intelligence, this is Hutter writing, basically saying, I'm the only one who's done it properly, right? Legg and Hutter provided a collection of 70+ definitions by individual researchers as well as collective attempts. Since intelligence is not just speed, what is it then? What will superintelligences actually do? So evolving intelligence, evolution, mutation, recombination, selection increases intelligence if useful for survival and procreation. In animals, higher intelligence via some correlated practical cognitive capacity increases the chance of survival and the number of offspring. But in humans, it's now inversely related. Intelligence is now positively correlated with power and economic success, and negatively correlated with the number of children. Memetics, genetic evolution has been largely replaced by mimetic evolution, the evolution of ideas, the replication, variation, selection, spreading of ideas, causing cultural evolution. What activities are intelligent? Which activities does evolution select for? And he doesn't really come to a conclusion. These are just possibilities. Self-preservation, self-replication, spreading, colonizing the universe, creating faster, better, higher intelligences, learning as much as possible, understanding the universe, maximizing power over men and organizations, transforming of matter into computronium, maximum self-sufficiency, the search for the meaning of life. Intelligence does not equal rationality, reasoning toward the goal. These maybe are related, more flexible notion, expected utility maximization, cumulative lifetime reward maximization. But who provides the rewards and how? Animals, one can explain a lot of behavior as attempts to maximize reward. Humans seem to exhibit astonishing flexibility in choosing their goals and passions, especially during childhood. So in other words, you don't just do the things that give you rewards, you're like curious about everything. Robots are usually at the present time rewarded by the teacher or hardwired rewards. So this institution is the third-ranked institution in AI, and reinforcement learning with Sutton is one of our important strengths, and that has to do with this idea of where the rewards come from. Goal-oriented behavior often appears to be at odds with long-term pleasure maximization. Still, the evolved biological goals and desires to survive, procreate, parent, spread, dominate, etc. are seldom disowned. Initialization. Who sets the goal for superintelligences and how? Anyway, ultimately we will lose control. The AGIs themselves will build further AGIs if they are motivated to do so, and this will gain its own dynamic. Some aspects of this might be independent of initial goal structure and predictable. So this is the kind of thing that AI safety conference in Puerto Rico in January 2015 talked about, and all these people plotting how to force machines that were smarter than they are to do their bidding. And if you can think of any analogous situation where you force somebody much smarter than you to do something, it doesn't usually work very well. So that's why I think Rich Sutton's idea of respecting the sentient AI, treating it as an equal, including it in your circle of empathy makes more sense. Evolving goals process. Assume the initial virtual world is a society of cooperating and competing agents. There will be competition over limited computational resources. Those virtual beings who have the goal to acquire them will naturally be more successful in this endeavor compared to those with different goals. The successful virtuals will spread in various ways, the others perish. Soon their society will consist mainly of virtuals whose goal is to compete over resources. Hostility will only be limited if this is in the virtual's best interest. Isn't that a scary lie? For instance, current society has replaced war mainly with economic competition, since modern weaponry makes most wars a loss for both sides, while economic competition in most cases benefits at least the government. The goal is to survive and spread. Whatever amount of resources is available, they'll be quickly used up and become scarce. So in any world inhabited by multiple individuals, evolution and economic-like forces will breed virtuals with the goal to acquire as much computational resources as possible. Virtuals will like to fight over resources, and the winners will enjoy it, while the losers will hate it. In such evolutionary worlds, the ability to survive and replicate is the key trait of intelligence. This is not a sufficient characterization of intelligence. Bacteria are quite successful in spreading, but they are not very intelligent. So obviously they're not necessarily related. Alternative societies, you could imagine global cooperation with no hostile competition. That likely requires a powerful single virtual world government, and for people to give up individual privacy and severely limit individual freedom, like anthills or beehives or a board or something like that. It requires societal setup that can only produce conforming individuals. Might only be possible by severely limiting individuals' creativity, like flocks of sheep or schools of fish. Doesn't sound like much fun. Monistic virtual worlds. Such well-regulated societies may better be viewed as a single organism or collective mind. Maybe the virtual world is inhabited from the outset, or just a single individual. Both virtual worlds could look quite different and quite peaceful or dystopian, more so than the traditional worlds created by evolution. Intelligence would have to be defined quite differently in such virtual worlds. Adaptiveness of intelligence, other important aspect of intelligence, how flexible or adaptive an individual is. Deep Blue might be the best chess player on Earth, but is unable to do anything else. On the contrary, higher animals, humans have remarkably broad capabilities, can perform well in a wide variety of environments. Formal intelligence measured by Leg and Hutter. Intelligence is the ability to achieve goals in a wide variety of environments. A formal definition implicitly captures most, if not all, traits of rational intelligence, such as reasoning, creativity, generalization, pattern recognition, problem solving, memorization, planning, learning, self-preservation, and many others. It's been rigorously formalized in mathematical terms, properties. It's non-anthropocentric, doesn't assume you're a human being, wide-ranging, general, unbiased, fundamental, objective, complete, and universal. It is the most comprehensive formal definition of intelligence so far, according to its author. Copying or modifying virtual structures. Copying virtual structures should be as cheap and effortless as it is for software and data today. The only cost is developing structures in the first place, the memory to store, and the computing resources to run them. Cheap manipulation and experimentation and copying a virtual world, virtual life itself is possible. So copying and modifying virtual life, virtual explosion with life can be much more diverse. In addition, virtual lives could be simulated in different speeds, with speeders experiencing slower societal progress than laggards. So like all of you are living lives where the pace of your life is more or less the same as for everybody else. But you can imagine a future world where there are different groups of humans who basically their clock speed is just remarkably different, right? Some are overclocked, some are underclocked. Yeah. Current society already relies on specialists with many years of training, so it's natural to go to the next step to ease this process by designing our descendants' designer babies. The value of life. Another consequence should be that life becomes less valuable. Our society values life since life a valuable commodity and expensive, laborious to replace, produce, raise. Value our own life since evolution selects only organisms that value their life. Human moral code mainly mimics this with cultural differences and some excesses. If life becomes cheap, motivation to value it will decline. Abundance lowers value. Analogies. Cheap machines decrease the value of physical labor. Some expert knowledge was replaced by handwritten documents, then printed books, and finally electronic files. Each transition reduced the value of the same information. Digital computers made human computers obsolete. The word computer was originally used for human beings who compute. In games, we value our own virtual life and that of our opponents less than real life, because games can be reset and one can be resurrected. Consequence of cheap life, governments will stop paying my salary when they can get the same research output from a digital version of me essentially for free. Why not participate in risk-taking, dangerous, fun activity if in the worst case I have to activate a backup copy of myself from yesterday and just miss out on this one anyway, not very well going day. The belief in immortality can alter behavior drastically. Value of virtual life, countless implications: ethical, political, economic, medical, cultural, humanitarian, religious, and art, warfare, etc. Much of our society is driven by the fact that we highly value human individual life. If virtual life becomes cheap, these drives will ultimately vanish and be replaced by other goals. If AIs can be easily created, the value of an intelligent individual will be much lower than the value of a human life today. So it may be ethically acceptable to freeze, duplicate, slow down, modify, brain experiment, or even kill oneself or others, or other AIs at will, if they are abundant and or backups are available. Just what you're used to doing with software. So if you think about how you feel about software, you worry about the welfare of software and stuff. No. So laws preventing experimentation with intelligence for moral reasons may not emerge. So little value assigned to an individual life, maybe it becomes a disposable. Are there universal values? Are there any universal values or qualities we want to see or that should survive? What do we mean by we, all humans, or the dominant species or government at the time? The question is asked. Could it be diversity or friendly AI? Could the long-term survival of at least one conscious species that appreciates its surrounding universe be a universal value? Okay, so back at this slide, you're starting to get depressed because a lot of bad news on every single slide here and so on. So now I'm going to bring you back out by talking about trying to raise the spirits, stimulate interest in the singularity through new holidays: Future Day, Longevity Day, Diversity Day. So what about the first Future Day? So the same guy who wrote the song was a part of our first Future Day, March 1st, 2012. A small celebration, but we still have that banner and everything, yeah. So, but how many other places celebrated Future Day in 2012? Well, there were a bunch. 16 other cities celebrated Future Day in 2012. And you might think, well, this will be exponential, like we'll get to hundreds and thousands and millions very quickly, but did you know it's going the other way? So, like every subsequent year, there have been fewer and fewer cities celebrating Future Day. And now, in 2019, it's getting down to just about us and maybe one place in Australia. So. We have a fantasy of doing an event at the Art Gallery of Alberta. We probably can't get organized for 2019, but maybe 2020, where we take over the whole thing and have a big Future Day on March 1st. Julie Lin Wong, who lectures on 3D printing, would be interested in running that event. And we also have the idea of the Edmonton Salon. Are you familiar with the Paris Salon? There are all these famous artists and writers in Paris all at the same time, and they would meet and have these fantastic parties, and they called it the Paris Salon. And why couldn't we do the same thing in Edmonton? Of course we could. So anyway, yeah, we were thinking also trying to do something like that. So the Paris Salon, a century ago, moved Western thought and culture forward, music, art, good conversation, something unique, innovative, and memorable. And we could obviously do that. Now I guarantee you next time I'll get some more recent pictures. So these are pictures of students in this course in 2014. So anyway, I'll replace them in future renditions of this. Big Bang Theory. For a long time, this was sort of my target, to take the ideas of this course and to reach as many people as the Big Bang Theory reaches. But now that the show has been canceled, this is its last year, so I'm going to have to come up with some new metaphor, I think. But I do have, like the episode of October 1st, 2010, I actually purchased that, and we can watch it together sometime if you want. This is one of the screenshots from that, and was the co-founder of Apple Computer, has cameo performance there. So, anyway, what else could we do to make a success of this new holiday? Or if you think of the existing holidays, they all have a lot of sensory experiences that you remember. They have smells and colors and sounds and all that kind of thing. So we'd have to do all that. I don't know how many of you know the Holi Festival. It's sort of like Color Me Rad, if you've ever been to one of those things where people sprinkle non-toxic pigment on each other. In India, it began with pigments from plants. But a lot of these colors are really hard to find from plants, whereas pigments from paint is really easy to find, but really toxic. So now in India at the Holi Festival, with all these skin and eye and throat medical conditions brought about by the toxic colored substances. So that isn't what we want. But it is kind of cool how it looks, and if you have not experienced anything like that. So I'm not saying that it has to be like this. I'm just saying if we really wanted to make a success of the holiday, it has to have this pageantry, and there have to be multiple components of it. So those of you who visited my Facebook page would know that the only poem there that I didn't write myself is this one, called the Crayola Bomb. Maybe we should develop a Crayola Bomb as our next secret weapon, a happiness weapon, a beauty bomb. Every time a crisis developed, we would launch one. It would explode high in the air, explode softly, send thousands, millions of little parachutes into the air, floating down to the earth, boxes of Crayola. And we wouldn't go cheap either, boxes of 64 with a sharpener built right in. Silver and gold and copper and magenta and peach and lime and amber and umber and all the rest. And people would smile and get a funny look on their faces and cover the world with imagination. And if that doesn't do it for you, you know about the Roomba robotic vacuum cleaner? This is a time-lapse picture of what that looks like if you have it on your floor, and time-lapse art. And if that doesn't do it for you, hot air balloons can give a similar appearance. But you're looking at a lot of money there. I don't have the resources at the moment to create a hot air balloon festival in Edmonton. But we can fantasize, and it wouldn't have to just be visuals. There needs to be songs and poetry, maybe the windmills of your mind, round like a circle, a spiral like the wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning, ever spinning reel like the snowball down a mountain or a carnival balloon, carousel that's turning, running rings around the moon like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face, whirls like an apple whirling silently in space like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind. So another thing we've done for Future Day is to put in an application with the city for particular lighting on the high-level bridge. And seemed really cool the year that we did it. We thought there was a lot of competition. It was really nice when, but I think there never has been a lot. They're not, like when you meet ordinary Edmontonians on the sidewalk, they are not plotting the colors to put on the high-level bridge. They're thinking about something else. So it's a fairly easy thing to do, and if you want to do it, we could do it. We decided that orange and green were our colors. One of the reasons is that the article about the course, those large stand-up robots that I have at my house are sort of orange and green, and it's also this Future Day banner has those colors. But we could also pick something else if you wanted. So your suggestions are welcome. How can we make a success of these things, or do you have a completely different and more radical and successful and innovative idea? That would also be okay. This last slide, Marcus Hutter insisted on. So this is what, this is where this stuff comes from. And so we needed references. So we don't get references for every talk, but in this one, Marcus Hutter said I could use this slide set as long as we gave the reference at the end. So that's what this last slide is. So ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the talk for today. And so we have 26 minutes. Is there anything I'd like to ask or talk about? Yes.
All right. So how many people should be in said student group for funds and all that?
Yeah, so I guess it starts with the core group. There has to be a president and a treasurer. And then those people try to generate students. I don't know what the minimum is. I think it may be 6 or 8, but it's certainly on the university website. It wouldn't be hard because you're not limited to the people in this group. You're limited to all the 16 classes who've ever taken and everybody's ever taught here. There's a lot.
Are we allowed to bring in people that aren't in this class but are also genuinely interested in this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly. And Yeah, I mean, we could go to the bank and reopen the bank account, that'd be really exciting. Yeah, lots of things we could do. Also, this decision doesn't have to impact on the refuseniks who don't want this, right? Like there might be, you can look at life in various ways. One of the problems with democratic society is that the minority doesn't end up very happy. I mean, you have a majority rule, and that's great. So there may be some of you with like kids and jobs and all that kind of things, so you can't come to things outside of regular work time, and you don't want the performer with the bullwhip. You have a prejudice against bullwhip performers and all these sorts of things. So we could structure it to take everybody's needs into account. For instance, maybe we don't want to mix the final presentations with the entertainment things that we do. Maybe we can keep them separate and keep the presentations during regular course time, so people who don't feel that they want to do the entertainment things are not left out in terms of the presentation. So yeah, I mean, I'm willing to look at any reality that exists. If some of you want to do some of this stuff. Nikolai Smith, I think, really enjoys performing for this class. I've kind of described him to many of you, but so he went to law school, and you may not know this about law school, but many people who go to law school never practice law. There are not enough lawyer slots for all the people who go to law school. Many people go to law school for other reasons. They want to become a successful entrepreneur. They think law would be a good background and so on. So he's one of those people. And so he's kind of your intellectual peer. It's just he's a professional street performer with a sort of similar intellect to yours, and that works for him. So that's nice in that, he's not just sitting there clueless about what we're talking about. He's able to integrate that into his act and sort of thing. So yeah, and we don't have to use him. You may have a brand new idea of who the entertainment should be. Maybe you've met a street performer who's way cooler than Nikolai Smith, or something. But you can kind of tell it's one of the aspects of this course that makes it interesting, and that will continue to be the case even if we only do this entertainment and food and drink stuff like every third time or every fourth time. I mean, it would still be fine. So it's never mandatory, but if a significant number of students want to do it, I think there's probably a way to have it happen where no one is, adversely impacted. You can speculate about a lot of things. People who don't like fun, so on. Well, maybe that would be difficult. Somebody who hates having fun, but in a more specific way, somebody who has a lot of life obligations in the evening and the weekend and couldn't ever go to anything then. So there might be people like that taking the course. So these are some of the things to think about. Lakini Bat, she gave a pitch about the student group about a year ago. You can watch her video and talk to her about her ideas about it. That was a very kind of shy group of students that she pitched to. It wasn't her fault. It was that those students never seemed, nothing stimulated them to talk much. They were fine students, but they just liked to be on the receiving end of a course like this, and they I didn't particularly feel that it was their obligation to have a lot of vocal utterances, so they didn't. Yeah, so anyway, this class might be different. It's also possible, of course, like I have lots of poet friends, musician friends, you know, and if some of you wanted, we could make use of that. And, you know, like we could have a featured evening at the Nook where basically we run the whole evening and, you know, mix poetry with other things and you know, that could be fun. There have been some years when there was quite a lot of that sort of interaction between the poetry side of my life and this course. But that also doesn't have to happen. Yeah, so you may get other ideas about this Future and All That Jazz performance on Friday the 25th is coming up pretty soon. So there are two Friday things, that's from 4 to 7 on the 25th, and then the next Friday is February 1st, and so that is my medical Grand Rounds presentation, which probably have things of interest to you. Actually, Ishita and I are doing that. So, yeah.
So one actual question about the earlier part about how an information collapse can happen. Aren't we always bound by an upper limit on the data we can physically maintain in society due to hardware and all that? It says that
people keep bringing that up. Like, you know, Ishita and I went to a lecture this noon, and the only part of it that I seriously question is people talking about, like, if you're scanning slides that have real depth, so you have to scan 5 or 7 times, that it's a real problem storing the data, that you couldn't possibly store the data. And that's just not true anymore. Memory is so cheap, and it's getting cheaper all the time, and you know, there are all sorts of ways. So I don't really think, I mean, I'm not saying that there's no limit, but it's much less of a problem than it used to be. Many of you are used to running out of space on your hard drive, but you would realize how old your computer is a big impact on that. If your computer is 3 or 4 years old, you're constantly filling up the hard drive. If you have a new computer, not so much. And why is that? It's because memory is very cheap.
all right, but even with a lot of memory, the techniques on information retrieval and all that jazz, tokenization, normalization, whatever searches, that typically keeps getting faster. So if you want to find something within the library, you're going to find it, no matter the upper limit of the data.
Oh, I see what you mean. You're talking about this library of Babel, which I already said I don't understand, right? And Marcus Hunter diagnosed me as somebody who was unteachable on this issue. He tried and failed. So I don't think this is an ideal thing for us to talk about for a long period of time.
Okay.
Why don't you look it up and see if you can come to a better understanding of it than I have. Then you can come back and tell us all how it all works. And our respect for you will go way up, man. Your social life will improve.
Get back to you after the semester ends. Courses on this.
Your success in the world is assured once you've done that. Yeah, totally cool. Yes.
So I have a question on a bit of a different topic. When we were talking about alternative societies and this idea that technology has already pushed us toward a more globalized, interconnected world, and then in the slides there's this idea of a single virtual government.
Right.
Even with that, though, as AI progresses, kind of before we reach that ultimate state, it's going to be humans who are setting regulations and putting restrictions on how certain technology can be used. So how do you think eventually we're going to bridge that gap between when humans still have to set the standard versus perhaps AI becomes so intelligent that it sets that standard itself?
Well, it's sort of already happening, right? I mean, like take Netflix, what you choose to watch, right? So Netflix suggests things to you. It's getting to know you better and better, and so you may resist now. You know, eventually, like it's better than you are. It will it will suggest it will suggest things that when you watch them are so satisfying that you realize this is better than what you could have done yourself. So there are lots of other things like that already today, right? So now that may not be in what you consider a meaningful area, but just think about Yuval Noah Harari's latest books in which he suggests that human culture will be wrecked soon because every plot line of every movie, novel, TV show, and so on, it all depends on human decision making. And very soon humans will find that machines are better at that. Even for choosing your significant other and what you want to do for a living and where you want to live and all those things that you would think, well, I want to pick that myself. When you pick that yourself and your friends let the machine do it, their lives just turned out way better than yours. They picked better mate and everything, right? So that's something that he postulates will happen soon enough that it's one of the main themes, that therefore all human culture is wrecked. Then I'm saying that if technology advances to that point, then the frustration you feel every morning when you wake up and you think about the limits in your life, the things you want to have, you can't have, the things you want to do, you can never do, that could all be gone if there were multiple instances of you, that you controlled them all. Some could be biological, some could be silicon-based, and during the day, these multiple instances of you are out in the world doing everything you want to do, having all the experiences, using all the stuff. And then, like in the evening, they can get together for these fantastic parties, and think how compatible the people at these parties will be because they're all you, right? No better party than multiple instances of you sharing stories.
Yeah, I guess kind of on the first point though, so right now, like those choices and the decisions that technology can make for us, they're still a product of the society that we're in. An example I was thinking of when you said Netflix, I think it was Amazon that looked at like screening resumes for hiring with like AI algorithms.
Right.
And then even those algorithms like had bias that nobody programmed into them, but it
Sure.
just picked up on
Yeah.
the patterns that already exist with the data that we put in. So I guess like where's the line between, are we putting data in or are we just letting machines make those decisions and like creating data themselves? If that makes sense.
Well, I think in a general sense, that's the same as the question of whether the initial programming of AGI, the first artificial general intelligence, will that matter at all? Well, it will matter, but it's not limiting, right? So it determines, like the programming that humans have put into that machine can have all sorts of ethical bases and stuff. I mean, the most moral humans can decide what that initial programming should be, and maybe that starts us with a very good point. But then the machine learns how to self-improve and can move in whichever direction it wants, and eventually that initial programming won't matter very much. So you're worried about human biases, but there could be other, machine biases. So that's not the only risk, is that they will pick up our racism, sexism, and so on. Yeah, that's a risk, but there could be new risks of things they value that people haven't valued before, and so on, you know? So, yeah.
Well, if the AGI is programmed by humans, wouldn't it always have that sort of bias? Unless it would kind of self-improve and figure it out itself, and then it would create one of itself, like a separate like application.
Yeah.
I guess is that. Because wouldn't it always have the bias if it is initially programmed? Like it might self-improve on other things, but kind of certain things hard-coded in.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think nothing's constant, and like one of the things that's so cool about Harari is when he goes to China, he speaks to the leaders of China, and they do a concert, named concert in his honor. Like that's the kind of hosting you're not going to get. So he is not. None of his ideas are static. You can't take one of his previous books, start criticizing, because he'll say, I've already gotten beyond that, you know. And so I think both we as human beings and sentient AI, the smarter we are, the more flexible we are, the more practical we are about what works now. And you know, yeah, I used to believe this, but now there's a new reality, and maybe this makes more sense now. Yeah, so any simplistic way of thinking about it, I mean, the thing you encounter all the time is humans made this machine, therefore it can never be smarter than its creator, because the intellect it has comes from the person who created it, and you know, that person has an IQ of 145 and a half, so that's the best. I mean, that is ridiculous. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Even if you're talking about not just general intelligence, but you know, all sorts of specific skills, that the limits, both for humans and you know, machines, that we may think of, that humans will never be better than a certain point and machines will no, there's no rationale behind those limits. You really, you know, we live in a limitless world in a sense. Yeah.
So I just want to comment on your guys' point. So you guys brought up the fact that there's bias present in different programs used by big companies. So the first thing is like Amazon's bias in recruiting through resumes. So I'm not sure what the bias is. Maybe it's racially based, which wouldn't be ideal. But if your company is big as Amazon, right, and you're getting like hundreds of thousands of resumes, right, having a program that has some implicit bias, which selects, for example, the best software engineers, might not be a bad idea. But then also you talked about how if humans have like a hand in designing the program, it'll always be like based off what the human wanted to. And I think there's a good analogy in this in when Google CEO testified to Congress, and basically Congress thought that Google search was being manipulated to show partisan issues more often, or negative views of the Republican Party. But many times over, the CEO, claimed that search is something that is an algorithm executed. So there's no outside biases that are presented into the system. So I guess in a similar way, like I think what I'm trying to say here is every program is going to have some set of intrinsic bias principles, and many of them are very hands-off from the human perspective. But how do I guess like how can humans still keep control of their programs and allow them to perform as well as they can without stepping on people's toes with partisan issues, or like making sure everyone's equally viewed by not cutting out thousands of resumes at once, So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
That's why you should document your code when you're actually working on things.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, like explainable AI, requiring AI programs to be explainable in simple English. If you think about that, as the programming gets better and better, that just doesn't make any sense. It's like the person gets smarter and smarter. You say your vocabulary cannot increase. Okay, you keep doing better things, but You may think of a concept that we don't have a word for, but don't worry about it. Don't make a new word, you know. That obviously.
I think I want to make a comment and ask a question. I think, I'm not sure about the specifics of Amazon's bias. However, I would think that it's a product of, right now, because actually somewhat intelligent AI would be still in its infancy. And the second is, I don't think there's enough data out there necessarily yet. So you get this repeated bias because, like, I think Microsoft had this Twitter bot that would, like, was this AI bot, but you could kind of manipulate what it says by feeding it a bunch of phrases, because at that point, at the level it currently is, it doesn't have enough information to make, I guess, more smarter choices. So you kind of get this repeating feedback loop of, and then you kind of get this bias being created. Perhaps that could explain one reason behind Amazon, and still because it's in its infancy. However, the question I had was with Moore's law, how do we know that, or I guess not how do we know, but so far Moore's law has held up for 50 years, but would you not reach a point where you physically cannot make, like, say, smaller microchips?
Well, the characteristics of chips will change, like the configuration, going from 2D to 3D and stuff like that. I think, and then there's quantum, right? So we're talking about conventional chips, but quantum will be able to do all sorts of things that conventional computers can.
Because the assumption, I guess, is that you will be able to currently continue on the Moore's law trajectory.
Right.
But I guess I'm thinking is, what happens if you cannot break through, like, say, quantum computing? Like, we've been trying at it, but we can't like jump over the barrier per se.
Right.
Would it like?
But there is another possibility, and that is occurring more quickly, some major advance, and it actually, and that would be like AlphaGo, right? That we thought it would be another 20 years before machines are better than humans at the game of Go. And suddenly, it's quite clear not only that machines are better, but machines have more artistic playing styles than a whole lot of things. I mean, the whole culture of Go has been changed watching these amazing things that machines do that human beings never thought of, playing that game. So that will also happen in other spheres. So you can say, well, that's a wild card. So those wild cards are unlikely. But if you're looking at enough different spheres of human endeavor and an unlikely wild card in all of them, the chances that at least one of these wild cards will come true becomes very high. So, that's, so you're right. We could get stuck, and what Rich Sutton says about that is the thing that will replace the human race is if the human race gets stuck. So what I was telling you about, Yuval Noah Harari's saying that our culture will be wrecked because machines will be making all decisions and we have no stories to tell. And then I'm saying our stories will be richer because we have these multi-threaded lives and we can do and be everything. So if that doesn't occur, if humanity gets stuck, then we probably are going to be replaced by something else. And if machines get stuck, that's harder to imagine because machines aren't just one thing, right? So how would they all get stuck? It doesn't seem likely that machines generally are going to get stuck. They're just going to reach a point where they cannot get beyond. That seems impossible, whereas humans could get stuck, yes.
Were you saying there might be a limit to Moore's law?
Basically, if I'm not mistaken, I think Moore's law is, or at least slowing down,
Yeah.
is what I've understood it to be. So,
Yeah, it is.
like
Right.
the toes.
Yeah, I bet they're like you're like if you talk about the big picture, I think there is like there has to be a limit, right? Like nothing is like forever. But I think we just have to reach the point where it's like over 1,000 flops per second computing, then it's like our level of intelligence.
Right.
And after that there might be a limit. But and I don't even know if it's just a correlation that we happen to be like following this trend, or if it's like we're meant to like
Well, I don't doubt that. Well, I don't really doubt that we'll hit the limit, because you could get a lot of different technological booms in different unrelated areas that kind of all come together to create a boom in one place. So like computing power allows for greatly allows for like bioinformatics, right? When it wasn't necessarily maybe thought of when computing power was first created. So I don't doubt in many different fields you get an explosion in technology. I just don't know if will you hit the stopping point before you create AI, or is it after, or will there even be one? And yeah.
And also to your friend, were you asking like when there's a line, like when there's a line between like human to AI? Were you just wondering like when that line is, or?
Not so much the line. I think I was wondering, since right now we need to input data for whatever AI system we create, at what point will that system create data itself? And if so, will that creation of data be informed by existing social bias?
Okay, yeah.
I can say something really quick to that. I don't know if you heard about this, but IBM Watson for oncology, it was like a pretty big, it was pretty big in the media just last year, where they created an algorithm that was being used in hospitals to provide recommendations. Doctors put in patient information, and it gave back recommendations to treat cancer patients with like probabilities of what would be the best treatment to the worst treatment. And at first they put in real patient data, but then afterwards it came out that they were using synthetic data, which is why Watson started giving sometimes harmful recommendations, so the whole thing just resulted in a huge disaster. So I think in that case they did start entering synthetic data to increase the amount of raw data since they didn't have enough. But it resulted in the opposite of what they wanted. So I think, at least from what we can see right now, it's going to be real data that we need instead of AI-generated data.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying like the output is always limited by what you put in.
Yeah, essentially.
And when is it like true their own like idea?
Yeah, I mean, you can say, well, okay, the real data has these characteristics, and therefore I can simulate the data, and create as much data as I want. But that's what doesn't seem to work at the moment, is, simulating the data to give you a greater volume of data significantly degrades,
Also, for you, I wouldn't say there definitely would not be a recent limitation of Moore's law, because we used to be limited to computation power by things like, I suppose, the size of our transistors, the amount of data we could fit in things, but with the advent and adaptation of more conventional quantum computing and all of that, we've yet to actually properly take advantage of quantum computing, so we already have a good way out. Technology!
If you get there though, right?
Technology!
I mean, I'm sure you'll get to quantum at some point,
Yeah.
just when.
Where are we at that point, though? IBM just released a new quantum computer meant for businesses. Although nobody has any idea how to use quantum computing for conventional development yet, so
Right.
I was on that.
Well, listen, guys, I'm happy with the way this is going. You're not a shy class, so there's pretty good output going on. It's 3:24, so it's probably ought to let you go. Thank you for this.